Good day and welcome back to Bloodleaf. We're on chapter 3, which starts on page 24. I'm going to try to make it through this chapter without yawning. I don't yawn because I don't like the books. I just get sleepy when I read. But chapter 3 is kind of short, so hopefully. All right. While the rest of the castle was preparing a feast for our royal visitor, I adjourned to the alcove where the royal family went to worship in elegant seclusion. Indeed, it seemed that while the Imperia demanded humility and simplicity from her worshippers, her own tastes ran more toward the lavish and opulent. The sanctorium was draped in silk and satin, trimmed with gold and lined on each side with tufted velvet chairs. Polished marble columns rose to a concave ceiling painted to look like the night sky, with smiling cherubs flitting merrily among the constellations as dark devilish figures stalked them from below. The painting was supposed to represent our human impulses, the righteous ones above and the immoral ones below. But I always thought it misrepresented the truth of things. Sins were welcoming and charming, like the cherubs, and with their bared teeth and hungry eyes, the devils looked alarmingly like the fervid mobs that frequented tribunal rallies. I was far more afraid of those who hated sinners than I ever was of sin. After letting the door close tight behind me, I turned the lock and lifted the brocade curtain to the inner sanctuary, where 100 white candles glimmered from golden candlesticks. I lit one of my own and placed it beside the altar. I knelt, murmured a hasty apology for the desecration I was about to commit, and then shoved the marble altar stone aside. With the interior of the altar exposed to the air, I gathered the first layer of my skirts to access the pocket tucked among my petticoats and removed the small spellbook I had hidden there. It was meant to be used in a trade with Mabel Doyle, but I guessed I'd be keeping it now. I paused guiltily, hand on the cover. I should have realized something was wrong that morning when Mabel didn't meet me for our usual monthly exchange of witchcraft lore. I'd waited for ages outside her bookshop before leaving in frustration, not knowing that I'd be watching her hang beneath the clock tower less than an hour later. We weren't that well acquainted. Because of the illicit nature of our dealings, we kept our interactions to a minimum. I never knew she had a family, or that she'd lost them. But looking at the books she'd traded with me in the last few months, spirit possession, necromancy, communication with the dead, I wondered how I'd missed it. "Clever," said a voice from the shadows beside me. Blasphemous and a bit impertinent, but clever. "Blood of the Founder!" I swore as I jumped back from the altar, nearly toppling a candelabra. "How did you get in here? I locked that door, I swear I did." Simon gave a soft chuckle and lifted his hand to show a droplet of blood on the tip of his finger. "One of the first spells I ever learned, how to go unnoticed, even when you're standing right in front of someone. I draw the blood and then use a recitation to focus the magic. Ego invisibilia. I am unseen. I followed you pretty easily, so just how long have you been using your time in confessional to study?" He reached into the altar and grabbed the nearest volume. "A blood mage's foolproof method to ensure a successful soybean yield?" He clicked his tongue. "I hope you didn't waste any blood on this one. It is likely a fake. Blood magic doesn't heal or grow things." "What in the name of the Holy Imperia made you think it was a good idea to sneak up on me and scare me half to death?" "But blood magic doesn't require incantations. Your words, or rather the words of the great 3rd century blood mage Wilstein." He reached into the altar and retrieved another book, a leather volume I tied with a ribbon to keep the yellowing pages from escaping the decaying binding. When I was in training, my teachers made me memorize it. They, too, believed that the use of incantations was more of a distraction than a control. It was an unpopular theory among many of the older mages. However, they did so like their arcane chants, made their demonstrations to the public more impressive, I think. Swirling robes, long white beards, bulging eyes, invocations in an indecipherable language, very memorable and awe-inspiring. Tentatively, I said, "But you used incantations today." I did. I do. Partly to keep the memory of my teachers alive. His hand went to a chain around his neck, but I couldn't see the attached pendant, tucked as it was behind his golden sash. And partly because I find that the words help me focus. Blood magic is rooted in emotion. The faster your heart beats, the faster your blood pumps. Pain, pleasure, fear, passion, anything that heightens your emotion can be used to increase the strength of your spell. But therein also lies the trouble. It's easy to lose your grip, let the magic overtake you. Concentrating on the correct pronunciation of archaic phrases helps to orient me, to keep me grounded. Over time and with practice, it gets less necessary to rely on such things. Magic becomes more instructual and easily accessible, more hazardous too. It's like a dam on a river. You can take it down slowly and carefully and choose what direction it flows. But if you aren't careful, you can bring the whole dam down on top of yourself. He shook his head. Needless to say, it is very dangerous to use blood magic without training, no matter how well-read you are in Willstein. Embarrassed, I tucked my hair behind my ear. I do read a lot, but I have tried a few things, but never anything. He pursed his lips and turned my fidgeting hand over. I'd left my gloves in my mother's chamber. In the window light, it was easy to make out the dozens of thin scars on my uncovered skin. Tell me, he said, how did your soybean crop turn out? I grimaced. In all honesty, I never had an occasion to try that one. He laughed. It wouldn't have worked, but it would have been fun to see you try. No, blood magic won't grow soybeans. That's better suited to another type of magic entirely. Feral magic? I guessed. Indeed. I see Vitessio's Compendium de Magia there in your collection. It's an excellent overview of all three magic disciplines. Good to know you've read that, at least. I have, cover to cover. The problem is there isn't much left between the covers. He picked it up and thumbed through the sparse pages. Disgraceful, he said. Someone has amputated 80% of the book. This is practically incoherent. Most of my books are like that. The tribunal's regular purges of witch-friendly reading material are thorough. I'm lucky that any of these books made it at all. Most of what I know I've gleaned over years, from snippets. In frustration, he slammed the book shut. Lesson 1. Magic is that thing that makes trees and animals and plants in us different from rocks and dirt and water. It is the spark, spirit, life, whatever you want to call it. It is power. That said, there are three prevailing methods of accessing this power. The first is called Sancti Magicae, high magic. Practitioners access it through meditation, prayer, spiritual communion with the Imperia. It gives them visions of the future, the ability to move objects with their mind, sometimes the power to heal. Renault's famous queen, Erin, was an anchorite of the highest order before leaving it to marry into the Renaultan monarchy. The second is called Fera Magicae, or feral magic. It is mostly herbology, divination, transfiguration. It's the magic of nature, of growth, of cyclical order and balance. Our namesake king, Aaron's brother, Aklev, was a mage of this order. And the last is Sanguinum Magicae, blood magic, magic of passion and sacrifice, probably the most powerful and destructive of them all. Before he swore off spells and became founder of the tribunal, the third sibling, Kale, was a blood mage and one of great power. The three of them together were very powerful in their day. Triumvirate, they were called by the assembly at that time, the best in their fields. I listened in silence as I used his simplistic explanations to fit disjointed pieces of my scavenged knowledge together. I never knew that about them. How could you? Simon said, casting a dour glance at my piecemeal library. Wait, I said. Did you say lesson 1? I asked hopefully. Does that mean there might be a lesson 2? Simon gave a low whistle. Your mother, when she wrote to me and asked me to come, said that you were dangerously unconcerned with the precariousness of your position. I begin to see that that was not an exaggeration." "She's wrong," I said. "I know exactly how precarious my position is." "And you collect magic books and practice blood spells anyway?" I shrugged, frustrated. "The tribunal terrorizes this country, my country. If they view witchcraft as a weapon, I must learn to wield it against them." I swallowed hard. "Before they can use it against me, or others like Mabel and Hilda." I pushed all thoughts of their deaths deep down, twisting my guilt and sorrow into the taut coil at my center. Simon was making a face. Lesson 2. Witchcraft is a coarse term. The assembly, fallen though it is now, never allowed its usage. The word witch refers to untrained, undisciplined practitioners, especially those who willfully ignore the assembly's statutes, which were established for the safety of all, mages and the magicless alike. The Assembly of Mages. It had waned in power for many years before it finally fell. I was too young to recall it myself, but I grew up hearing stories about the grand, glorious festivity in Renault that had accompanied the news of its demise. It was an occasion often remembered and remarked upon with nostalgia, a source of fond anecdotes to exchange in good company. "Where were you when you heard the news? Remember the fireworks, the dancing all night in the streets?" It wasn't until I was much older that I realized that what everyone was celebrating was death. Death to people with magic, like me. "What happened to the assembly?" I asked. "What really happened?" A shadow crossed Simon's expression. "A lesson for another day, I think." "So you'll really teach me?" "When you stepped into that triangle during our spell, the luniocyte stones flashed, an indication that you are already somewhat attuned to the power. But magic, blood magic especially, can be grueling to learn and painful to practice. With the assembly gone, I've long wanted to pass my knowledge on to another generation. But the last time I tried to take on a novice, I'm afraid it did not end well. What you experienced within the triangle today was just a breath of what's in store. I must ask you honestly, are you sure you're up to the task?" "Yes," I said. "Absolutely, yes." "All right then, I'll teach you. Just on a trial basis, mind you, and only after we're back in Aklava, after the wedding. Until then, I think it would be wise if you abstain from magic completely. That way we can start fresh, and you won't be dead." "Both good things, I suppose." I paused. "Are you not going to lecture me about revenge? Tell me that after becoming Aklava's queen, I should just let my grudge against the tribunal go?" "Dear me, no," Simon said. "The tribunal is an abomination. I can think of no greater legacy for a queen of 2 nations than to rid the world of that organization for good." I sat back, speechless. For the first time in my life, I was looking forward to my wedding. "I've never thought of it that way." "It won't be easy, mind you, and Aklava may not have the tribunal to worry about, but we have our own troubles." The corners of his mouth sagged, and I began to see those troubles etched in the creases framing his lips and eyes, easily mistaken for laugh lines. "I'm hoping that, while I'm here this week, I can look into some things that have been disconcerting me back home in Aklava." "What do you think you can discover in Renault? Renaultans can't even cross Aklav's walls without—" Trying to be delicate, I waved my fingers up and down. When his eyebrows shot up, I said, burning to death. Our histories were full of horrific illustrations of Renaultan armies dying in large swaths trying to breach Aklav's wall. Prompted by the writings of the tribunal's founder, Kale, Renault tried for 300 years without success until the marriage treaty allayed the aggression between our countries, if not the underlying enmity. "Renaultans don't have to cross our wall to influence what goes on behind it," Simon said. "I want to figure out the reason for the sudden abundance of Renaultan coin in circulation with ours. Merchants forging new trade deals with coastal Renaultan ports that would never have received them before. Hallowed Graves, Delina." I stiffened. "Delina?" Do you know Taurus Delina? He's a tribunal magistrate. I can hardly picture him welcoming Aklavan's ships to his port unless it somehow furthered his ambitions. Perhaps his ambitions include gaining influence in Aklava. A dreadful thought. I catalogued the information. Taurus Delina, magistrate, bearer of the Founder's blood, making secret trade deals with Aklava? Well, if you find out anything, let me know, I said. Taurus's voice was ringing in my ears. Mabel Lawrence Doyle, you have been tried and found guilty by fair tribunal for the distribution of illicit texts and have been condemned to die. Maybe adding a bit of tarnish to Taurus's sterling reputation would be my parting gift to Renault. If the truth was bad enough, it could cost him a place at the magistrate's table, or, even better, it could gain him one in a cell, or on the gallows stand. Maybe this time Taurus had put the rope around his own neck. The end of chapter 3. And I made it without yawning. All right, so we will pick up again with chapter 4. There are some activities on Google Classroom. There's vocabulary and a few questions for chapters 1 through 3. So at this point, if you want to do those, I think there's only 4 questions. And then pick up with chapter 4. We will continue the exciting story of the Bloodleaf. Goodbye.